Hello everyone, it's Father Hayes, and we are continuing our series of videos on the Mass, and we have been beginning to work our way through the actual parts of the Liturgy of the Eucharist. So as a quick review, we can break the offertory, which is the first part of the Liturgy of the Eucharist, into three separate parts. The first would be the preparation of the altar, which we talked about in a couple of recent videos. Now we're going to talk about the gifts that are presented to the priest, and then later on we'll be talking about the offerings as they are being prepared. So right now we're going to focus on the gifts. Now, one of my primary sources for this video, as well as some of the other videos, is this book by Jeffrey Pinyan, P-I-N-Y-A-N, and it's called Praying the Mass, the Prayers of the Priest. And there's another book that goes with it called Praying the Mass, the Prayers of the People. So it's available on Amazon. It's always a good resource to get. But a lot of my comments are going to be taken from this book in this video today. So in the offertory, we've had the preparation of the altar. Now we have the presentation of the gifts, which usually takes place in an offertory procession. Now the offertory procession actually dates back traditionally to almost apostolic times. And one of the earliest records we have of it comes from St. Justin Martyr in his work called the Apology, his first apology meaning a defense of the Christian faith, that St. Justin wrote to the Roman Emperor roughly around the year 164, 165. So this is dates back very early days of the church. And in that, he talks about the bread and the wine being brought forward. Now when we look at the bread and the wine, along with in the offertory, we usually have the collection, and maybe there'll be, especially in certain special circumstances, maybe gifts of food or other kind of gifts. When we look at the bread and the wine, these are the indispensable elements, because without the bread and wine, there's no matter that will be confected into the Eucharist. And with no Eucharist, there's no Mass. All right, so we're focusing now specifically on the elements of bread and wine. Now, Pope Benedict XVI makes an observation about these kind of fundamental elements of creation and how they apply in the liturgy. And he says this: there are four elements in creation on which the world of the sacraments is built: water, bread, wine, and olive oil. So basically, when we talk about sacramental matter, almost all of the sacramental matter of the sacraments comes from those four elements: bread, water, wine, and olive oil. And he goes on to say, while water is the vital element everywhere, and thus represents the shared access of all people to rebirth as Christians, the other three elements belong to the culture of the Mediterranean region. In other words, they point towards the concrete historical environment in which Christianity emerged. This is worth reflecting on, because Christianity, we continually make the assertion, the claim, that we don't derive Christianity from mythology. You know, our religion, our Catholic faith, our Christian faith didn't start from some mythical, mysterious time way, way, way in the past. But we can point to specific historical period of time, a particular place in the world, particular people that were involved in the beginning of the Christian religion. So bread and wine, the Pope Benedict XVI also points out that bread and wine point to a particular culture, but they also point to different aspects, different facets of human life. So bread is a symbol of everyday life and of toil, whereas wine is a symbol of feast and joy. Then in talking about the presenting of the gifts of the people to the priest, Pope John Paul II says this. He says that the offering of the bread and wine to the priest by the congregation is a symbolic exercise of the baptismal priesthood of the congregation. So it's not simply, oh, this is a nice kind of sentimental gesture, but something more profound in our identity. Our core identity is being lived out, is being exercised. And he goes on to say this: although all those who participate in the Eucharist do not confect the sacrifice as the priest does, they, meaning the congregation, they offer with him, by virtue of the common priesthood, their own spiritual sacrifices, represented by the bread and wine. From the moment of their presentation at the altar, the bread and the wine become, in a sense, a symbol of all that the Eucharistic assembly brings, on its own part, as an offering to God, and which it offers spiritually. So, while on the one hand the bread and the wine are indispensable because materially they are what will become the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, at the same time they are representing the gifts of self, the self-sacrificial offering of each member of the baptized. And that was John Paul II in his document on the mystery and worship of the Eucharist. And what his statement is, we hear his statement articulated in the prayer of the Mass that we hear at every Mass. And the priest prays, "Pray, brothers and sisters, that my sacrifice and yours will be acceptable to the Almighty Father." So again, the "my" is not Father Hayes or Father Bob or Bishop Burbage or Pope Francis, because there's only one priest in all of Christianity, and that is Jesus, the eternal high priest. We all participate in his priesthood by virtue of first our sacrament of baptism, where we are grafted into the person of Christ, and then for the ministerial priesthood through the sacrament of holy orders, right? But we are all called to be offering ourselves freely in union with the one priest as sacrificial victim. Now, we can also add to this a reflection on the manner in which we get the bread and the wine. So, bread is gathered from many grains into one loaf, so we have that unity of the many into the one, and many grapes gathered into one chalice or one cup. And we can see that as the many members of the mystical body coming into the one body. But at the same time, how do we get grain into bread? Where there has to be a crushing of the grain into powder that is mixed with water to be baked into bread. The same with the grapes. The grapes have to be crushed into the grape juice that will later become the wine. And so this shows how we must die in baptism in order to be incorporated into Christ. So when we see in the procession and the presenting of the gifts to the priest, sometimes there's a lot of distraction going on. Sometimes people see that as a nice little bathroom break. But we have to see the deep significance of that moment, as simple as it is, in what is about to happen in the liturgy of the Eucharist, but also in who we are in our core identity and what it is we're participating in. May God be with you.